It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought us to the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the powerful Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all of the people. A great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we are able to reason, we're able to talk to each other, we're able to listen to each other, and we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. May 25, 2020 was a very significant date, and it will be, for Black Lives Matter and for all of us. A police officer in Minneapolis murdered George Floyd. It's on video for all to see. There isn't an awful lot to debate about it. He kept his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for about 9 minutes while he was being warned constantly that he was choking him. About as clear a case of premeditated, intentional murder as I've ever seen. He's only been charged with murder too, but from what I can see on tape, I don't know all the other facts. What I see on tape, looks like he could sustain a premeditated murder charge because he had so long a period of time to consider what he was doing and kept doing it even though he was being told, "You're choking the man." Well, in the immediate aftermath of that, I had the feeling that this just might be the case that would unify us. Because within minutes of seeing that on television, I received calls from police friends of mine who generally are biased in favor of the police, as there are people biased on the other side. And I thought they were going to try to somehow justify this horrible thing that I saw. Just the opposite. They were in a state of shock to a person. And they felt something had to be done about it. And that there had to be things done about vetting police officers, about training police officers. They could see in the tapes surrounding this, because these were police supervisors of some distinction, they could see big gaps in the way these police officers were trained. Not that justifies, nothing justifies deliberate murder, but there were things like supervisor not being on hand. They're not appearing to coordinate with each other. They seem to be helter-skelter in what they were doing, keeping it all out on the street much too long, which is a terrible mistake that often creates the riot situation. So I can look at that and say, this is not a well-trained police department. And therefore, not that training will stop a murderer. It'll stop a lot of maybe the more questionable ones, which is the usual situation. It's usually not as clear as this was. President Trump was one of the first to strongly condemn it. There were no words of hesitation, or he saw the video and he reacted to the video just the way you probably did and just the way I did, and said he condemned it. This was a terrible thing that happened, and we're going to have to move on it very quickly. And very quickly, the FBI got into the case. FBI, in these other cases, even during the Obama administration, took a long time to get in because primarily it's a matter of local jurisdiction. FBI got involved in this faster than any similar case that I can think of. There may have been one that was faster, but I can't think of one right now. But there certainly can be no complaint that the president didn't react to it appropriately and beyond appropriately, making available the full resources of the federal government. So now we have the president, the FBI, the police supporters, the other side, the Democrats, even the people who are radical and the people who even embrace violence. We have them all agreeing that this was wrong. This has to be straightened out. There's got to be justice here. And there has to be a follow-up to determine how can we reduce the possibility of something like this happening again? What can we learn from it? And there are things, just looking at that, I can see have to be taught. But this idea of unity was very, very frightening. Something constructive would come out of this, because they're really not in the game of fixing police brutality. They're in the game of overthrowing your government and your way of life. And unity, coming out of something like this, would set it back. Unity would also help elect President Trump. And the Democratic Party is willing to do anything, even deprive the country of a more harmonious time or in order to defeat Trump. So immediately, they inserted a wedge into this. Immediately, they took over, both them and Antifa, the protests, which began as peaceful protests, quite appropriate, of an unjustifiable murder, because it ran counter to their objectives and the objectives of the Democrat Party. Their objectives are to overthrow our government and replace it with a socialist government. Democrat Party objectives are to defeat Trump at any cost and don't give him a victory over anything. Don't make it look like he's able to work with African Americans or Black Americans to try to calm this issue of police brutality, much as he's worked with them on other things very successfully. Pastor Scott probably describes it best. Let's just listen to him.
One reason they created that wedge was because they were not able to somehow pin this on President Donald Trump. If they'd have been able to pin it on President Trump and make Trump the target, he'd have been the target of hatred for this, they would have had a good day. But the president, as you stated, he immediately came out. He immediately denounced the officers' actions. He immediately stated that there was an injustice done, and the left was like, oh, shucks. Yeah. We wanted Trump to say something so we could try to make him the face of this, but they weren't able to do it. I'm sorry. And the frustration boiled over where they had to take another tactic. Well, let's just burn everything down then, because we can't pin it on Donald Trump. And it's sad, but that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make him the face of the George Floyd incident. They wanted to make him the face of the Ahmaud Arbery incident, and they wanted to make him the face of this protest and rioting, and they can't.
Right.
And so there's a great deal of frustration there.
You know, if you have any doubt that what I'm telling you about Black Lives Matter isn't so, about their objectives, just do a little reading. And they're not my words. I'll refer you to a document that is called A Vision for Black Lives, the Movement for Black Lives. This is a group of organizations, the principal one being Black Lives Matter, and it was published in 2017, so it's pretty recent, but it still has some history to it. And in it, they describe in different sections the objectives of this movement that you should learn about, because they're asking you to take a knee to it. And in many cases, like on one of these websites, they're asking you to donate money to it. So now you go read what they're about. You see if you agree with this. They want to end money bail. They want to end the use of past criminal history to determine employment, housing. In other words, you could have a dangerous criminal come live next door to you, or you may hire a very dangerous criminal. You're just not going to find out about it. Basically, the end of law enforcement as we know it, and particularly in schools, where we need it badly, and in college campuses. An end to public jails. I don't know if that means there should be private jails, but I don't think so. I think that means an end to all jails. How about this one? There's another demand platform. A guaranteed minimum livable income for all black people. For all black people. Now, there are other people in the country. There are Hispanic people, there are Asian people, there are white people, but only the black people get the guaranteed minimum livable income. I don't know, you're trying to set up a socialist society. Didn't you now set up a special class of people who don't have to work? The Trump campaign has a special offer just for you. President Trump really wants to give you a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat. He wants to make sure the lucky winner is one of his top supporters. Be sure to enter soon, because this is an opportunity you don't want to miss. This offer is only going to a select group of supporters, and you are one of them. All you have to do is text Rudy to 88022, and unlike Joe Biden, you'll remember that. Today, for your chance to win a signed 2020 Make America Great Again hat and own a piece of history. Again, that's Rudy, R-U-D-Y, to 88022 to enter to win this contest and join President Trump in the fight to keep America great for 4 more years. This was paid for by Donald J. Trump for President, Inc. I don't know, did anybody who donated, any of these corporate guys who donated, read that? And what do they think of it? And then they want further reparations. They don't say exactly what it is, they want a commission set up to determine further reparations. That could be interesting because not every black in America traces their roots to slavery. And much of America, on the white and other side, had nothing to do with slavery. Gosh, my grandparents rather, came here after slavery was over, and they were part of a group of people in the late 19th century that were the second most lynched group in America, Italian Americans, second only to blacks, and the third were Jewish Americans. I'm not saying the same things happened, but I am saying it wasn't like easy for anybody. Harder, definitely harder for black people, but there's an awful lot of discrimination and horrible things that happen in this country. But we learn from them, and we make changes, and we improve. One of the few countries that has that self-correcting mechanism. I can't think of anybody else that really has it the way we have it with such strength. They want a retroactive decriminalization and immediately release of all drug-related offenses. All. Not just the guy smoking the joint, but the guy selling the heroin, and the guy selling the cocaine, and the guy selling the poison, who are multimillionaires and big-time drug dealers who run these neighborhoods, like the Nicky Barneses and the Frank James that I put in jail. You probably have seen the movie with Denzel Washington. Maybe you haven't. These people should be let out of jail. First of all, they're violent criminals. Drug dealers are violent criminals. 70% of the murders that you see happening in New York today are drug-related. Take it from me. I started doing it when I was 24 years old. I know the streets of New York as well as anybody, and better than any mayor has ever known them, because I grew up here. A lot of them didn't. And I was in law enforcement here at the ground level when things were really bad. When you say major drug dealer, you say a man who possesses numerous guns, is surrounded by people with numerous guns, and in the course of his business is going to shoot and kill people. And sometimes, as we see happening now, they'll shoot a 1-year-old and kill him. They want universal health care. Don't know if it's for everybody, because they list certain groups that get it. Blacks, of course, specific services for queer, gender nonconforming, and trans people, full bodily autonomy, full reproductive services, mental health services, paid parental leave, and comprehensive quality child and elder care. Who's going to pay for this? The people that they hate? The white males who they hate? They're going to stick around and pay for this? They want a constitutional right to a fully funded education. So they don't want to work, or they want to have the option of not working, and they want a free education. Who's going to pay for that? A divestment from fossil fuels, which basically means, we're going to have to do it with airplanes. I mean, this is so totally childish and, in this case, stupid. Some of it is extremely dangerous, like the next one. Ending our military, so China can take over the world. A communist country. A right to restored land. That means they can claim land as part of their reparations, maybe your land. An end to the privatization of education. You must be educated in a state school. No vouchers, no charter schools, no Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, or Muslim schools, no homeschooling. You have got to be educated in the state school so they can teach you what you must believe and repeat. And we see the consequences if you don't say what they want you to say. You are a racist. You are a white supremacist if you don't agree with every single thing they say. An end to the criminalization of black political activity, including the immediate release of all political prisoners. And an end to the repression of political parties. Well, I don't know who these political prisoners are. Their definition of political prisoners, like a murderer or a terrorist, might be different than mine. They then also go on to, and it's one of their prime goals. Actually, it's one of the first things they stated when they started. They want to do away with the nuclear family. What's the nuclear family? It's a mother, father, and child. They want to get rid of the father part of it. And because they say women are perfectly capable of bringing up the child and they can use the state to help them to do it. So mother goes to work and she turns the kid over not only for education, but for, all day brainwashing by the state. They want to do away with fathers in a family. Or they don't want to see, they don't see that as an ideal. Of course, that completely contradicts every study ever done of the consequences of a child living in a two-parent family and coming out of a one-parent family, and it neglects completely the analysis of one of the things that the black community needs to reduce the level of violence, which is more involvement of the father in the life of the child. I mean, this almost seems like something that is designed to destroy and make situation in the black community worse so they'll be more dependent on them. I mean, this is a truly hateful idea to do away with the family. I mean, in fact, the whole program is a program of hate. I mean, this vision for black lives is a vision for a country that has to be taken apart, destroyed, its values, its government, its way of looking at things destroyed because it's such a hateful government. And Ken Blackwell, who was the former Attorney General of Ohio and a former candidate for governor, and a very, very wise man. I found Ken to be a very wise man. He describes this, what's going on here, particularly with the election coming up, as a titan clash of two world views. Now, I'll let him do it in his own words, and then we'll talk about it. This is Ken Blackwell.
They want to move from our efforts to create an opportunity society to, in fact, create an expansion of the welfare state, where the central government is more involved in our lives, taking away the basic responsibilities and common sense structures of local government and state government. They see bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. managing our lives. But you mentioned something. One of the things that we've known, whether we're black, white, Asian, Latino, is that the family actually in our form of government is the incubator of liberty. And by definition, when this organization, this movement wants to destroy the nuclear family.
I think Ken has said it very well. You have on one side a socialist, atheist, no private property, dependency state, where people are dependent on the government, as opposed to a free enterprise state with the maximum amount of freedom from government. Enough control so that people lead peaceful and decent lives, but not too much so that people can't make decisions about their lives, their sexual practices, their religions. I forgot to mention that in their statement of goals is also implicit the end of religion, since, as you know, Marxism, one of the major definitions of Marxism is that God is the opiate of the people, that he's a form of suppression by the bourgeoisie over the proletariat. The bourgeoisie here are the white, hateful white men, and the proletariat would be blacks and a few others that they put into that category. I couldn't believe we were evicted from our home that we didn't even sell. Those are the words of a homeowner, Deborah, when she learned she was the victim of home title fraud. It's a devastating crime that can cost you your home, and title fraud is not covered by insurance or common identity theft services. The only folks to trust that I know of to protect your home's title is Home Title Lock. Cyber thieves have discovered the titles to our homes are kept online. They forge your name on your deed stating you sold your home, and they refile as the new owner. In Deborah's case, she didn't even know she was a victim until the eviction notice arrived in her mail. Home Title Lock protects you and your home by putting a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant they detect tampering, they mobilize to shut it down. Go online to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and don't know it. Then use code RUDY, that's me, and sign up for 30 free days of protection. That's code RUDY at HometitleLock.com. Ken then goes on to really focus on the things that he thinks are the most important about the way in which Black Lives Matter aggressively wants to undermine the American way of life.
You know that they're going right at the heart of our structured liberty. And Rudy, look, there's another thing. This is the same Marxist-oriented crowd that wants to drive God and faith out of the public square, because they understand that if you think that your basic and fundamental human rights are not grants from government but gifts from God, that you in fact are inclined to put a restraint on the reach of government. That's not in their program. But to make this transformation that they want, what they want to do is to create chaos. That's why they move quickly away from the pursuit of justice for George Floyd. You know, they ripped off that mask, and now what they're doing is organizing chaos and giving rise to the advance of anarchy and free reign to the criminal element in the communities in which we're able to witness this with our own eyes. So that's what it is. There's a clash. You know, we've never claimed to be perfect, but that we are a perfectible. We're a perfectible union, and you have to have the imagination of Walt Disney to think that in 244 years, we haven't made major strides forward in terms of becoming one nation under God. E pluribus unum, from many one. And so we must take notice of what they're trying to do, and we must push back.
And how do we do that? What's the best way for us to do that, Ken?
Well, one of the things that we must do is we must look at the facts. We must understand that you cannot have, you know, vibrant, prospering communities with good schools. We appreciate that the first order of responsibility for these mayors is to make sure that their cities are safe. You know, from your experience, Rudy, you know that you can't have quality schools in an unsafe environment. You, in fact, can't have prospering businesses in a city riddled with violence. So the first order is that we have to demand that these mayors and city council members do their job. And that is, they must deliver safety. And if they can't do it, they must be men and women enough to say we need a coordinated effort from state and federal safety forces to bring order and the rule of law to our cities.
David Harris Jr. also points out that the Black Lives Matter movement is a direct attack on basic American values, and in particular, on the belief in God and on families with fathers, which is so hard to believe. The first thing they put out when they formed, the three-woman forum, their first goal didn't have to do with police brutality. It had to do with doing away with the nuclear family because it was destroying the black community. Now, that's short for doing away with fathers.
Yes.
Now, David, explain to me how anybody with half a brain would want to have less fathers in a society, not just in the black community, but all throughout our society now. We have too many fatherless children, and the outcomes for them, unfortunately, are much worse. These are just facts than if you have a mother and a father. Now, sometimes a mother by herself can do a great job, but she's working against the odds.
Yeah, she is.
So how does the black community, which I know realizes the importance of family, how does the black community react to something like that? They just don't hear it, I don't think. Like the white people don't hear that.
Yeah, I don't think that they are hearing that. That's not the message that the mainstream media, the liberal media, even Fox is really talking about too much.
It's also quite clear that the title of the organization, Black Lives Matter, is contradicted by its goals and its practices, its actions. Actually, most black lives don't matter to Black Lives Matter. If they care about black lives, it's at most 1% or less of black lives. It's just those killed by the police, or maybe some other white, that can be exploited for the purpose of dividing us and for the purpose of them making millions of dollars. That's it. They express no interest in, let's say, in 2019, in the 9,000 blacks that were not killed by the police. They were killed by civilians, 8,000 plus of those killed by other blacks. There's no interest in that at all. And no interest in doing anything about that. And no interest in saving those black lives. And they show no interest in what they have spawned with their demonstrations of lawlessness, which are these murders that are going up in many, many cities in the country, particularly cities represented or controlled for ages by Democrats. Just no other way to say it. Democrat cities, sometimes for 100 years, with an occasional Republican or none. I mean, they show no concern about the 50 or 60 or 70 or 80. A weekend with 90 shootings in Chicago. 8 people dead, 10 people dead, 20 people dead. No interest in that. These are black people killed by other black people. 90% of the times a black person is killed by another black person. No concern about Chicago. It's a killing field. Killing their own people. There are things that can be done about it. Some of them are totally opposite of what Black Lives Matter wants to do, where they're going to make it worse. Get rid of the police, get rid of families. There can be more murders as a result of their objectives. So not only do they have no concern about them, their agenda is almost aggressively pointed against them. They weren't even moved over the past weekend by the death of Janari Ricks, who's a nine-year-old boy. Or several weeks ago, the murder of Davil Gardner Jr., who was caught in a crossfire, probably between drug dealers, the people they want to release more of from prison. That was in Brooklyn, not too far from where I grew up for 7 years of my life. That was on July 12, 2020. And that same day, a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old were shot. No concern by Black Lives Matter. These black lives didn't matter. Don't tell me they care about black lives. They are phony radicals. They are liars. They care about not black lives, but lives they can exploit for their radical purpose of overthrowing our way of life and for the purpose of collecting the millions and millions and millions of dollars that go through terrorists and end up with them, convicted terrorists. Any black life that's lost that doesn't assist in their narrative, who cares? Who cares? Where's the demonstration for them? Where's the list of demands for how to straighten out black on black crime? No, that doesn't further the narrative of the root of all evil is racism, slavery, and the evil white man. They are just born as racists. Absolutely their belief. It is a virulent hatred of white males and the police. Let's listen to Pastor Scott, who comes from Cleveland, so he's got pretty good perspective on this.
They're not really interested in black lives. They're interested in black lives if the black life expires at the hands of a white person. They don't care about black on black crime. They don't care about black on white crime. They don't care about black on brown crime. The only crime they're interested in is white on black crime. If a white person kills a black person, they become nothing more than ambulance chasers. Now we can rush to the scene of this crime and make a great big incident out of it and overblow it and exacerbate the situation. But when you look in Chicago and see people being slaughtered en masse, when you see babies getting killed, they're quiet as a church mouse because it doesn't feed into this narrative that they have.
All of this is made worse by the fact that we're in an election year and the Democrat Party is about as cynical and as vicious as I've ever seen any political party. The Democratic Party is sitting back, not criticizing any of these things. In some cases, showing some degree of sympathy for them, but certainly not condemning some of the excessive violence that's going on. Why are they doing that? Because they want to defeat Trump, and they hope that this disorder will help to defeat Trump. And defeating Trump is more important than saving the business for the Giacomo family, maybe their shoe business, or the Horowitz family, their delicatessen, or saving the lives of police officers that have been killed, or maybe even the Gennari and Davil, 9 and 1. They're not important enough. Getting rid of Trump is most important. So they'll enable this. Sit back, not criticize it. In some cases, give it support. There's a recent book out. It's going to take you a while to digest this if you're not into this, because it's very hard to believe. But it's done by David Horowitz, and the name of it is Blitz. And it's already a New York Times bestseller. It must kill the New York Times that this book is a bestseller. And let me just read to you one quotation from the book. I don't have the time to really go into it in detail, but this is something we'll be talking about in the future. You should read this book. Democrats have a scandal to hide. What they fear is that their political opponents, meaning Republicans, will draw attention to the Democratic Party's role in the corruption, crime, and poverty that afflicts African American inner cities. Well, of course they have a role in it. They've been governing those inner cities forever. Republicans haven't had a chance to screw it up. I know that by having taken over from Democrats and having to straighten it out, and having straightened it out, and turning it over to a Republican independent, not a Democratic Party hack, Bloomberg, who kept it really good. I mean, it's very telling to note the fact that we've had now riots in New York continually, on and off. We hadn't had riots since the last Democratic mayor. We haven't seen this kind of violence since the last Democratic mayor. We haven't seen the graffiti and the homelessness since the last Democratic mayor. This isn't a myth. This is the truth. Democrats ruin inner cities. And they have no interest in improving the lives of African Americans, or they would have done it. They've had 50 or 60 years to do it. And then he goes on to point out they're controlled by Democrats almost forever. And they're kept that way so that it's a vote that they can count on. And they don't want Republicans getting in there and getting any portion of that vote. But this is becoming a real problem for Democrats now because these riots and crime epidemics are happening, if not exclusively, almost exclusively in Democrat cities. You can't escape it. You can't blame it on Republicans when they haven't had a chance to govern for 50 years. So this may very well crack through. And President Trump also having a record of success in delivering for the black community has them panicked. I mean, for years they've been trying to do prison reform. The first black president couldn't do it. President Trump did it. And it's real. And it makes up for a lot of the mistakes of Joe Biden, who's got a very checkered history with regard to racism and his friendship with racists. He also produced, President Trump did, the lowest unemployment in the black and Hispanic community ever, the largest number of employees, and the highest wages. The first black president didn't do that because he's part of the party that takes them for granted. Worse than that, he's part of the party that exploits them. Trump wants to take them out of poverty and was doing a really good job of it until the pandemic came along. But the economy is coming back faster than anybody thought. We were going to supposedly lose something like 8.5 million jobs. We gained 3.5 for that month. Next month, we were going to lose another 4 million. We gained 5.5. The stock market looks like it's betting on a full recovery, which means you know those jobs are coming back. They're starting to come back, and they're going to come back faster and faster as we reopen. Let's listen to David Harris on just the overall contributions of Donald Trump to the African American community. It's what we're doing right now and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
We're telling them things.
Yeah.
Because we have a biased media, we're telling them things they should know. I mean, they should know that the 3 women who run this say, they don't lie about it. They say we're Marxists.
Yeah.
And we want to overthrow your government.
Right. Yeah.
Press
and the
doesn't
nuclear
print it.
family.
Yeah.
So I think that everybody has a part to play. You know, mine before I blew up and some of my videos started going viral and that led me down the path that I'm on. I was just sharing articles with friends, with family. I'd post articles on my page and hoping that somebody would see it and would learn something from it. So, you know, we all have something that we can do, and we have to understand and realize that we are in a fight. We're in a battle for our country, that he's done any of these things. And so I say, try to get off of your, whatever you're used to watching. Normally it's CNN or MSNBC. I said, do some research, go research these things specifically, and you'll find out that this current president, Donald Trump, has done more for the black community than any president probably since Abraham Lincoln. You know, now I understand the Republican Party. I believe because there was such a monolithic voting for the Democrat Party that the Republicans just kind of said, well, we're just going to leave them alone. We're not going to really go up, try to engage as a whole. Individuals like Mike Huckabee, I think, was against the grain on that. He had amazing results
Always.
as with what he did. I think you did too, obviously. But I think overall, there's been that kind of gap where a lot of the Republicans just didn't reach out because there's been such a blind allegiance to this Democrat Party that just gets our votes, just like, without even having to do anything. Just pull the race card, pull the victim card, and the Republicans are racist, so vote for us. What I believe Donald Trump has done is brought the Republican Party back to its roots.
And instead, what could have been a unifying moment becomes this craziness that we have.
Yeah.
But there's still plenty to work together on. and get over
Yes.
this. I think what you're doing, what I'm doing, what all these people are doing with this alternative media now. And just so you don't think it's a singular opinion, let's see what Pastor Scott has to say about it.
The stock market is back up, and the left-wing media is being quiet about that. And when the president said, "What do you have to lose?" You know what he was saying, Mr. Mayor? He was saying, "Give me a shot."
Yeah, exactly.
Just give me a shot.
Yeah, they've been
Give me a
they've
shot.
been screwing you for years, double-crossing you for years.
And in 4 years, come back and tell me how I did. And here it is 4 years later, and he's done a great, great job. He's exceeded expectations, and he's exceeded his campaign promises to the black community.
So, the true members of BLM, not the ones who have the wool put over their eyes or willingly or unwillingly, the true members are the ones who have studied the philosophy and the goals. They know that and read the literature, as I have, and there's a lot more. Here's the excellent other article I mentioned to you by Peter C. Myers, The Mind of Black Lives Matter, and there's several good books explaining this. So the knowing members of Black Lives Matter know that it's an organization built on hating America, completely destroying the government as we know it, destroying our way of life as we know it, that it's a country that was founded by evil men and is now governed by mostly white, evil men. And it's a country that presently significantly oppresses blacks and takes away their rights day in and day out. Hence, they seek the overthrow of our government as it exists, and they want to replace it with a socialist model of their own. Socialist model that gives special status to blacks, but basically government ownership, government control, government schools. The 2020 election will determine which direction we go in, because the Democrats are all in with them. They don't separate themselves. And if they win, this is not a group you can say no to without tremendous amount of trouble. And Biden sure doesn't look like a guy who can have the strength to ward off people who helped get him elected. Look, he doesn't seem to have strength at all. And he was a miserable panderer when he was 50 or 40 or 30. He'd basically say anything people wanted to say, or plagiarize people, as he did in law school. He did as a senator. This is not a guy with a backbone. He doesn't have a backbone. They'll walk all over him, if he even knows what he's doing. This organization and this group now forming, and the hatred of America is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Do away with the police, do away with the military, do away with private schools, do away with parochial schools. Really disregard that whole freedom of religion thing in our Constitution. Well, that's what you're voting for if you vote for Biden. And sure, they're going to make a hell of a try to have that happen. You want to see your way of life taken away from you? You want to see it ripped apart by people who hate your country? That's the choice you got. The other side of it is Trump, those of us who support him, we opt for keeping our way of life the way it is, and our constitutional government the way it is. And we continue to seek big improvements under that system because it's proven to be the most resilient and the best system in the world. I just, kind of conclude with, why do we have an immigration problem if this country is such a hateful country? Why do more people want to come to this country, risking their lives even, than any country in the world? Because it's a great country. Each one of us should be, including the Black Lives Matter people, all of them, should be so grateful they're in America. Sure, we've done things wrong. We'll do things wrong in the future. Yes, we have a mechanism for correcting it, and we've shown tremendous bravery in correcting the things that are wrong. Bravery of all the lives lost in the Civil War. The bravery of the black lives and the white lives lost in the Civil Rights Movement. They're an exceptional country. Not exceptional because it's perfect. If it was perfect, it wouldn't be human. it is exceptional because it can correct itself. And it does. And it will. And we're at a stage now where we're close to full equality. We're not there yet, but we're real close. A lot closer than anybody thought we would be. And Donald Trump, that they hate and despise so much, he's done a lot for it with the prison reform and the improvement in economics, the things that he's done to show that there are other solutions, free market solutions that might really work much better than the dependency that Democrats have held blacks in for so long in these cities that are falling apart. That dependency doesn't move you out of poverty, it keeps you in poverty. There are competing ideas that they should be open to, but this frightens the decrepit Democrat Party. So you got a choice, Biden or Trump. You vote for Biden, going to be an inexorable move to socialism, to these very special interests of Black Lives Matter, reparations, salary for life, selecting property, no private schools, pretty much no private property. Your family sort of gets ripped apart like they do in China and gets daycare, because daycare is better than a dad, and then gets propagandized by the state. You don't want that. And you know that Biden doesn't have the strength to resist it. He doesn't have the strength to get through a press conference. He doesn't even have them. He was never a strong man. He was always a panderer. This may have happened if he had his full faculties, because he was always a stupid man and a weak man. But now he doesn't have his full faculties, and they're surrounding him. And you don't think they're going to expect their pound of flesh if he wins? And what do you think happens if they don't get it? They'll get it, because Democrats back down in a second. They back down to AOC. And we'll be headed for socialism and far worse than that. If we elect Trump, we're going to preserve our way of life. We're going to build, as we built in the first term, on a free enterprise government that can outcompete any country on earth. It can be, and it will be, and it is the strongest economy on earth. Even now, wounded, it's the strongest economy on earth. It's the country that has brought more people out of poverty than any country in the history of the world. And it's a country where we have the right to love our country. We have a right to love our flag and our national anthem, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have a right to be proud of our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers who did more to liberate other people than any country in the world. We left so many lives in Europe to liberate them. Who's ever done that? Armies went overseas or to other countries to capture them, not to free them. White people died fighting for the freedom for black people, just like black people died to fight for the freedom of Europe. Plenty of black people. We're united much more as Americans than we're divided by race. So Black Lives Matter, get lost. Go spew your hatred somewhere else. Go defame the greatest country in the history of the world with imperfections somewhere else. Go to Europe where they like to hear that. Go to the socialists and the communists in Europe. Go to Venezuela. They love to hear you in Venezuela. But let's reject this attack on our way of life. There's a way to do it. You know what it is. You vote for Trump, a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate. You give them the biggest defeat in the history of America. And in 4 years, we'll have a much better Democratic Party. They'll cleanse themselves. That'll give them the courage to stand up to these arsonists, these rioters, these murderers, these criminals, and these people who want to destroy America. You got a choice. You can take a knee with Biden, or you can stand up proudly for your country, your flag, your national anthem, for our military, for our police, and vote for Trump. It's your choice. a lot at stake, and we'll be talking a lot more about it. Thank you very much. And I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please get on my website and ask me. I'm more than happy to provide you with the background material for everything that I've said. I tried to do some, I couldn't do all. We'll see you very shortly.